Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to our Falling Walls Breakthrough Conversations. For those of you who are still joining us now, I'm Angie Hassan, Associate Editor at Nature Communications at Springer Nature, and today I'm going to be having a conversation with Rachel Kropa. But before I introduce my guest, I just want to remind you that this is a unique format that is made possible with a partnership with the Federal Ministry of Education and Research and Springer Nature. And with this format, we hope to be able to take you with us into the minds and experiences of our science leaders, outstanding scientists, emerging innovators, and science entrepreneurs. And this is your opportunity to engage in our discussions and to ask us questions. You will have a chance to do this throughout the entire conversation. Please just raise your hands on Zoom, and we will spotlight you and unmute you so you can ask your question yourself directly. And if you have another question, just raise your hands again, and we will try to get to as many of your questions as possible if time allows it. And if you have any technical issues, just write in the chat, and our technical moderators will be able to assist you. So it's a pleasure to welcome Rachel Kropa at the Falling Walls Breakthrough Conversations. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, good morning.
Rachel is the winner of the Breakthrough of the Year in the category of Science and Innovation Management, together with the actor Robert Downey Jr. for their NGO Footprint Coalition, where she's a founder and the managing director of Nonprofit and Science. She's also a founder and managing partner at Range Media Partners, chairs the LA Board of Peer Health Exchange, sits on the board of directors of the Environmental Media Association, and is a member of Sierra Club's Arts and Entertainment Council. Previously, she was co-director of the Foundation at Creative Artist Agency in LA, where she led social impact programs and environmental initiatives. Today, we will discuss breaking the wall to rapid science funding and how Footprint Coalition is disrupting funding paradigms to benefit the planet. She has a talk about that tomorrow, where we'll hear more about it and how it all started, so we won't spoil the entire talk today. Hi, Rachel.
Just some of it.
Just some of it. So, you actually studied biochemistry
Yes.
at the University of Virginia, and you also have an archaeology certificate from UCLA. So, biochemistry and archaeology, what drew you to the field of environmental science?
So, biochemistry I studied just because I loved it. Everything in my studies when I was younger trended in the direction of being able to study biology and being able to study chemistry, both. And I really enjoyed just being able to do that through the course of my undergraduate. But I always did have a love of archaeology and wanted to study it. I just thought it maybe would be less practical in application. And it turned out that I ended up in entertainment regardless. And so I have been doing that for almost equally as long as I did science. And that's been very fruitful in the realm of science communication. And a lot of the way I kept my hand in while being in entertainment was doing environmental work. So ESG work for the companies that I worked for, recommending different strategies to clients of the companies who were interested in environmental philanthropy or scientific philanthropy. And so that's how I've kind of learned the aspect of bringing it to a larger audience. And, you know, biochemistry seems like a far cry from environmental work, but actually there's a lot of stuff that is very current about environmental science that allows you to sort of learn it over a period of time through a lot of what's happening in different regions around the world.
Okay. So Footprint Coalition has funded around 30 projects in 2 years. Mm-hmm. Sometimes some of these projects were funded in less than 2 months. Mm-hmm. Can you briefly take us through the funding process at Footprint Coalition?
Sure. So the science engine specifically is this mechanism that we've created where, because Footprint Coalition itself, I think, you should understand is a nonprofit, has a venture capital arm and also has a media arm. And that's the entirety of the organization. I run actually the nonprofit part. Mm-hmm. So within the nonprofit part, it's a partnership with the Experiment Foundation. And we built this science engine to provide fast grant seed funding plus public crowdfunding for individual environmental researchers. So Footprint, but really anyone could do this, seed funds each individual category in that science engine at $50,000 to $100,000. And then right now we have 7 categories actually, and I think we're at 33 projects as of today. But the 7 categories are cellular agriculture, conservation biotech, indigenous futures, environmental justice, meta-science, mycological innovation, and the newest one is negative emissions technologies. So for each project, there's 3 phases of how it gets executed, right? The first phase is an individual researcher applies within their category for $5,000 to $10,000, so it's a small grant, and they can do that with 2 pages of work on the back end of a platform, and then the platform prompts some scientists to review it for legitimacy. And then in the second phase, there is a science lead that's running that particular category who knows a lot about that field, even though it's usually a very new field in environmental technology. And that person acts like an angel investor and pushes it through to the live part of the platform, with our money being 50% of the total. And then we all work together with crowdfunding and media and the storytelling to do the rest. And so then, phase 3 is just the research is ready to go. And so that can take even as little as 2 weeks, depending on how ready the network is to fund. Or it could take maybe as long as 3 months, but it doesn't take much longer than that ever. And it can be researchers from around the world, which is awesome for us because we want to be able to reach as many people as possible. And we're trying to amass a lot of folks on the ground who can do what's important to them regionally, and then also things that apply in a lot of different places around the world.
Right. And you mentioned 7 categories. And of course, there's several technologies in environmental science. So does that mean those 7 categories are where you are focusing your priorities right now?
It just means that's what we've been able to launch to date. In fact, it's important that you get a science lead who's really driven and has a decent network and pipeline to be able to spread the word about the project being open. But we have probably 40 more categories that we'd like to launch. And it's a matter of getting enough momentum for the ideas to be able to launch those categories and to have a science lead who's really driven to do that work. Yeah, so there's limitless potential, I think, and there's a lot of iteration in this model because it can happen so fast and it is fairly inexpensive, obviously. But we're just needing more people to join up and to fund alongside of us.
And you mentioned, of course, crowdfunding is a major part of this model. And so what happens when a project does not get the crowdfunding that it needs?
Well, I think we have a pretty high success rate with this model because we're really focused on making sure that the scientists succeed. If they didn't receive their full funding for some reason, or if they decided to opt out because they realized something else needed to take priority in the next certain year or what have you, then they could essentially remove the project. The project doesn't get funded. It doesn't go to completion. It doesn't make its goal. It doesn't get the money. But it's a very rare situation, actually, for us.
Okay. So you mentioned that you're now working, there's many projects, right, in these categories. Is there a specific project that you personally are very proud of?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. It's like choosing your favorite child or something. All the 33 children would be a lot, though. But, I'm fond of the scientists who do the 3D printing of Wagyu steak because they are using a lot of materials that are pretty abundantly available. So they have a desktop 3D printer that was originally a plastics printer, I believe, and has been modified to use a filament that accepts cell cultures.
Wow.
And they're awesome, and they're a team of all women, so I'm partial to them.
Women power.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in the mycology category that have really promising work because I think fungus has been overlooked for a really long time. And folks were sort of, that category was the most ready to go at launch date. People were excited to hear that it was that, they'd said, finally, we've been waiting for this mycology category and now it's launched. We're so excited. So that there's a good community around that one. That's also a European science lead, which is fun. So I'd say, I'm excited to see what happens with negative emissions technologies too, because we have 2 science leads for that category. And one of them is in the biological realm and one of them is in the industrial realm. And so together they can sort of paint a picture for how this can work holistically because it is such a new field.
Right. Very interesting. So with the model that you just explained to us, surely it comes with some challenges as well, right? What are some of these challenges?
The challenges can be, because a lot of the subject matters are new, that it may not always find an immediate audience. So we work really hard with the network of the scientists themselves. So people who, your mom would care about, of course, which project you're launching, but also, their immediate peers that work with them in maybe a lab where they are, or, someone who's a mentor to them. So making sure they're communicating with those folks in their immediate network, then making sure the science lead is also communicating with their network and people who care about the subject matter, and then making sure that we do the really broad communication. All together allows a lot of potential outreach, but people may still not know. So, exactly what the project means and what the implications are. So we try to do a really good job. Experiment, luckily, has a really great process for making the projects understandable and compelling and giving guidelines to individual scientists about how to tell their stories so they have the broadest possible audience. And so it also has this added benefit of it's really transparent on the site, obviously, and allows journalists to come mine stories from the results. But it also makes the scientists think about, how am I going to get people to be interested in the subject matter by telling them what the broader story might be, so it doesn't look like such a niche idea that people wouldn't necessarily feel related to.
Understanding is very important also if you want to fund it, right?
Right.
You're not going to fund what you don't understand.
Totally.
So that's a very important point.
Yes, and it also allows things to be a little, farther afield from maybe what the standard set of characters in this research field are doing, right? So you can do really high risk, high reward things with an interesting hypothesis. And you can also, get a lot of folks in who are not, like I said, the people who are typically likely to get funding. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you think this model can be extended to other disciplines besides environmental science?
Sure. Experiment Foundation is kind of a new aspect of experiment.com, which has been around for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So it's been for a while a crowdfunding site for people to put up kind of their ad hoc scientific projects. Mm-hmm. They've been historically tagged and categorized, but they haven't been under an umbrella like this, what we're doing, for one particular directed effort. So you may be able to put up a project in archaeology, for instance, just by yourself, sort of in a vacuum. And if you have a great network, it could get funded, and that's separate, and that has existed. This model where you can take funding from foundations or corporations and have it be nonprofit funding put into a specified area of interest is new, and it's actually something that we've been working with the platform on for a long time.
It would be great if we could also do this in disease models for finding therapies for diseases and other pressing issues.
Yeah, there's a lot of new science models, which I think are fantastic, and some of them are just more expensive, like focused research organizations or prizes. We are a little less directed, I'd say, than even those. The banner of environmental technology is quite large, but those have a pointed outcome and effect that they want to achieve. Mm-hmm. And for us, it's more about how much science can we get done, how much can it impact, and then hopefully in the next little bit of time, we'll try to figure out how we can scale some of the findings. And, it's our first year after having our first set of research lab notes come out and people's published results. So we're trying to figure out next who wants to commercialize, who wants to figure out how they can broaden their work. And that will be kind of phase 2 for us of figuring out the life of the science engine.
You're also founder and managing partner at a company that provides management and representation services. which at first glance is completely different to the work that you do at Footprint Coalition. Do you think you benefit from adopting different views and perspectives in your positions? And to what extent do you think?
Yeah. First, the storytelling part of what we do at Footprint, it's really important that, and we're fairly small, so we all work very closely together. It's important that I understand how stories get told in a way that's useful and broad to a big audience. What a lot of people don't realize about the entertainment industry is it's very discerning when it comes to what feels like an underlying message that is going to appear less entertaining or going to appear like we're feeding someone broccoli. So what I realize and what I try to do in my other job is figure out what's appealing to the biggest number of people, and then bring that back to the scientific work that I do, so that I make sure that I can be that bridge for people to, getting a broader group attracted to their work. I think that's one really important thing. It's also the idea that a lot of the folks that I work with at Range have an interest in social justice. It's, of course, it's interesting to think about today as election day in the US, or will be shortly. And a lot of folks are very interested in that. So it keeps me mindful of how that plays into what people actually experience in their day-to-day lives, whether they're calling it environmental work or public health, and how planetary health and human health are intertwined. And so that's important for our work in things like environmental justice or Indigenous futures on the science engine as well.
Before we wrap up, I have to ask this question. How is it like working with Robert Downey Jr.?
I think I may have said this once before. He is like, kind of like a chef.
Okay.
Right? So he understands really well what is appealing to most people. And he can run the restaurant of entertainment very well because he understands what's like down the middle. People are going to love it. I have a little trouble, and I'm also a non-taster, so I don't really do a good job with understanding like what people are gonna. I think I cook well for my family, but I don't know exactly what everyone's gonna like and enjoy eating. But he has a really great sense of it and makes fantastic, entertaining content out of virtually anything. And so he always has really good intuitions about what will be something that people will appreciate or people will want to hear. And I tend to, trend a little more in the direction of my true scientific, bone, if you will, my core. So together we have a good pairing, because basically I'll say, okay, here's the message we have to deliver, and he'll say, here's how we have to do it, so people will listen to it. That's
the perfect balance.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we don't have any questions from the audience, thank you very much, Rachel, for your time. Yeah. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you for the interview. I haven't heard anything through the earpiece, so
yeah,
I feel like
we don't have any questions.
We've answered everyone's questions.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for the audience for joining us, and now we'll take a short break. Thank you.
Thank you.